things you can't really. It's not really a luxury buy.
Well, neither is the herpes vaccine or herpes stuff.
Huh?
And they're like, if you have herpes or if you've had it in the past.
Yeah, but there's a lot of different herpes medications out there. I'm assuming. Just another.
Oh, they're going fishing. There's a lake down there. There's a, oh, that's really pretty.
That's Lily Lake. Oh, you're on your phone with your mother.
No, I know, because we're going towards Lily Lake. I thought we were going towards Lily Lake. I didn't know it was going to be right here.
Yep.
That's really pretty.
Uh-huh. More like a pond, right? Whatever. Even though there's not a single big pine in here.
The pine tree is on the side of the house. Left side of the house. There's a nest in there. And I heard the babies tweeting. So I couldn't quite see it because I'm a little short, but.
You're really short.
I'm really short. Stop talking to Jason.
I don't think I've even ever met you.
I know. You don't.
I may have been mistaken. I think this is just parking.
Nan skates by a wolfie. Look at the big doggy.
Oh, it's so cute.
I've been thinking.
This is